Hello, and welcome to the Cinematic Soul. Last time we spoke about Alexander Payne. We talked about Election. We talked about Sideways. We talked about Nebraska. We talked a bit about Begonia, and we kind of parsed what makes these kind of philosophical, intellectual movies work so well. Uh, and I teased the idea that I might talk about Begonia a bit more at length on this episode, but I've changed my mind. I looked at the few movies that I still have uh, DVD cases and everything for, just to kind of get some ideas, and I found this one. And I think we're going to talk about this because I love not only philosophical, talky, intellectual movies, but I also love horror movies. I love practical effects. I love that horror is kind of an umbrella genre and a lot gets thrown beneath it. Uh, it's obviously first and foremost it's is it scary, right? So you have comedies, you have dramas, and you have horror. Does it make you laugh? Does it make you cry? Does it scare you? Um, but lots of things can scare you. Like I would say more so than comedy.
The United States government has been forced, reluctantly, to take action to safeguard what it believes are legitimate Western interests in the Middle East.
Because if you step out of line with what is kind of uh, what's kind of the general masses agree is comedy, you become a fringe thing, you become a dark comedy, right? Or something like that. Or they say, oh, that's more of a drama than a comedy. It's there's less wiggle room within that genre, and I would say the same within that genre, and I would say the same with drama as well. But with horror, it's like everything else. Everything that's not those things falls into horror. And a lot of people that make horror movies, they encompass all of everything in between as well. Like they have funny, they do have philosophical. Sometimes they're way more philosophical than the intellectual type movies that are, win all the awards. You see all kinds of deep philosophical ponderings, and the thing is that since it's first and foremost its goal is to scare you, it gets a pass when it explores these things. um and people tend to not pay so much attention, so you see some very like intense metaphorical explorations in a lot of horror movies that just and maybe they lead nowhere, and maybe they're not really well articulated, but they're oftentimes like gonzo, like they're really visually extreme
No one will ever love you like your mother.
in a really artistic way. I guess that's what I'm getting at, is like ideas are explored in a very artistic way, because you're dealing with life and death, and you see like mutant creatures, for example. You see like hybrid humans, like David Cronenberg style creatures. He tends to fall more under, he's been recognized more as like a philosophical art house director, though if you watched his movies in a surface viewing, they would probably be just considered horror.
Videodrome is death.
And there's tons of horror directors that maybe are not quite as articulate cinematically or recognized as such as David Cronenberg are, but they're doing similar things. And so that's one of the reasons that I find horror fascinating, is that you see things and you go, wow, that's really profound and deep. And then it just kind of gets ignored because the movie is also like, people getting their heads chopped off and stuff. And so anyways, I feel like Day of the Dead kind of occupies a space between philosophical and horror, and I don't know that it actually got as much love as it deserved from the horror community or the cinematic snob community. And it's hard to really articulate what works so well. It's really visual. Let's just start with that.
The brain is the engine, sir, the motor that drives them.
Like right off the bat, it's got this kind of droll, kind of droning score right at the beginning. And the streets are empty and people are looking for other survivors. This small group of humans are looking for other survivors. And you see not much going on, but there's a couple like walking dead, and they're real torn up and nasty. They look like they've been there for a long time. It's hopeless, and this is what this movie often gets described as. This is why people would say in a critical analysis that this movie is ineffective. In a lot of cases, they'll say it's because it was too bleak, it was too hopeless, and it alienated audiences. But I think it works on an aesthetic. It works on an aesthetic level that really, at least for me, hits me with a really intense and distinct feeling. It's a distinct feeling. And I've thought a bit about this. The effects are like unparalleled even today, I would argue. That's probably what first drew me to the movie, was the Tom Savini and just the effects that looked so real, and the blood is so dark, and it's not cartoonish in any way. They even used real like dead pig body, guts and stuff for some of the scenes that were, it's kind of known behind the scenes stuff that they used pig guts, but they were put in a cooler that wasn't actually cold, and they sat in the sun, and then they were rotten, and these were the guts that were used as one of the character's innards. So the actor had to be drenched and covered in these nasty rotten pig guts that just stunk to high heaven. And so that part of that is what influenced the the performance in the scene. It sounds miserable, but this was like art. And I think of any movie ever made, it seems like the effects and the director and everybody were working so perfectly in tandem. The respect from the director, George Romero, and Tom Savini was so profound that they were able to put their heads together in a way that elevated the scenes with the effects, because when you see the effects, you can see that the scenes were framed around the effects, but clearly there was enough communication that the effects were shot in a way that's very artistic. It's very aesthetically pleasing. They're beautiful, 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 beautiful. Like, I'll say it. I think at times Kubrickian. It's fucking beautiful, and it's like a nightmare. There's a part where the girl is sitting in the room looking at the calendar, and it's totally quiet. Like a bunch of this movie is just really quiet because there's not that many people left, and the zombies are not really all that threatening unless there's a horde. And she's sitting there looking at a calendar, and then a bunch of hands just shoot through the wall, and like, that encapsulates the tone of the whole movie, right? It's like waiting, know your doom is coming, waiting to get absolutely engulfed by doom. That's the feeling of the movie. It's like it creeps in at every turn. It's like you can never forget that you're trapped in a bunker underground, surrounded by death and demise, and it's coming for you.
I'm gonna have my men blow the piss out of those precious specimens of yours, and we're gonna get the hell out of here and leave you and your highfalutin asshole friends to rot in this stinking sewer. Is that food enough for you?
Where will you go, Captain?
I guess in when it's explained that way, I can see why it wasn't super popular with everyone, because that's not enjoyable for a lot of people. But people who appreciate high art and things like that should be able to watch it and still. And I, when I watch it, I don't feel depressed. I feel excited by the effectiveness of the filmmaking. And so I think that maybe that's why it has such a small audience, is because if you enjoy filmmaking, you enjoy the craft, and you watch it, you're going to say, oh, whoa, my gosh, it's so effective. And then it has kind of the reverse effect on you, where you're not depressed by it, you're excited by it because it's so effective. It's almost like magic. And so you're like, smiling during these really dark scenes. Yeah, the effects are absolutely insane. And then Bub, right? There's a zombie in the movie who they try to train to become a human. They think they're so hopeless, they're not going to find a cure or anything for the disease or whatever it is. And so the only hope they have is that they think they might be able to teach and domesticate the zombies. And funny enough, the doctor seems to be having some level of success by domesticating Bub. Bub's humanity is still in there a little bit. And in a way, it feels cynical. In a way, it feels godless, because the idea of a zombie for most people is that there's nothing really in there anymore. But the idea that there is still something in there, and there is a bit of that person still in there, it tends to suggest that there's no soul, maybe. Or maybe it's a ruse. Maybe it's maybe if you want to get spiritual about it, it's not really a person, it's just mimicking a person. Maybe that's closer to it. But it feels cynical, this doctor, and that this is what he's doing, and he's able to coax out some humanity from Bub. It feels really cynical to me, but it feels also maybe truthful to me as well. Like, this is what you would do if you had no other options. You would try to teach this zombie to be domesticated. Not much in the way of likable characters, really.
This ain't a goddamn field trip, people. This is a fucking war!
The female is the protagonist mostly, and then there's the pilot and his buddy they're planning to run away to an island because that's all they can do and just live out their days until they die. I guess in a way, the hopelessness is it had to be this way, because in Dawn of the Dead, you have the beginning where there still is hope because there's still a decent amount of people left.
You never know.
And there's not really an answer as to where the zombie situation is headed. Not totally, but by this one, it's totally confirmed that there's nothing going. It's just the diminishing number of humans left on Earth. There's not much. So it's kind of the natural progression of the Dawn of the Dead, and then the Night of the Living Dead. Of course, you can't forget the Night of the Living Dead. But this is nobody's favorite, I feel like, or if it is the favorite, it's just it's kind of a niche favorite, and for me, it's clearly the best. The effects alone, and I'm a huge proponent of real effect, and I don't know where cinema is going now with all of the digital effects works that's going on. I don't even know if in 20 years there will be people with the skills to pull off the prosthetics like you see in this movie. They just won't be around anymore, because why would you learn to do these things when you're not gonna get much work. Um, so yeah, the effects were huge. The music was another big thing, and I couldn't tell you who did it. Music by John Harrison. It was beautiful. It was all perfectly put together, and I don't want to make this too long. One other interesting aspect of this film is that, and I don't want to denigrate any of the actors involved, but this is not A-list Hollywood fare.
Bang! You're dead!
I wasn't around when this came out, so I don't really know how this fits into blockbuster Hollywood's, type deal. But it feels lower budget, in that sense that you don't have a, whoever would be the A-lister at this time, Tom Selleck, I don't know. There's nobody like that in this movie. They're not, and so the performances are not like through the roof, I guess is my point.
Anybody else have any questions about the way things are gonna run around here from now on?
But they work for what it is. The dialogue is to the point. It's crude. You have to give movies like this a little bit of a pass. And that's the thing with horror in general, is that horror movies oftentimes have a lot of like profound thoughts to explore, but you have to enter into them with the correct framework. You cannot go in and be the cynical viewer that so many young people are today, where they'll turn something on and they'll be like, well, that's dorky, and they'll just turn it right off. You have to overlook the shortcomings to appreciate the deeper things that are oftentimes working or explored. Because I think every filmmaker who makes a horror movie has something they're trying to say, right? Something that compelled them to write it, put a group of people together, and go for it. Sometimes it's just purely money and motivation. Sometimes they made the movie they wanted to make, and then they are getting money and requests to make another one. And so in that case, they don't really actually have as much to say, because they're just trying to collect. And in those cases, I think those are hollow and vapid, and those don't deserve our respect. But movies like this, where people take big swings and they're like they're obviously willing to alienate their audiences, because this is not a mainstream movie by any stretch. There's clearly they're trying to say something here. And I think it's worth it to wade through shortcomings. You don't really have to try that hard with this, but with other horror movies, you do have to overlook a lot more. But it's worth overlooking the shortcomings to try to see what is the director's motivation, what insights do they have to offer, what passions do they have that compelled them to try to put this thing together. I have a movie sitting next to me, this horror movie that was made by a local person here in my hometown, and he gave this to me, and I watched it, and it's not perfect, but it's clear that he didn't have a bunch of money to make it. He didn't put aside a bunch of money to make it. He made it as a passion project. And so therefore it's worth, how can I articulate this? When you watch horror movies and you see really strange, surreal things start happening, you can tell pretty clearly right off the bat if those strange, surreal things are just for aesthetic purposes, or if they're an attempt to explore something deeper, like a deeper idea. If they're driven by a deeper, passion for something. I'll give an example. Terrifier is purely spectacle. There's something compelling him to make those Terrifier. Was Damien Leone? Damien Leone, I don't know how you say. There's something compelling him to make those movies, and they're fun. But the depth or whatever he's tried to put in there to give it some substance has been reverse engineered. I think his first driving motivator for these movies was, let's see how crazy we can make these effects. So when you watch it, it's very clear that that's what's going on. And that is totally okay. And I enjoy the hell out of those movies. And I've loved watching his progression as a filmmaker, as his first love of effects has put him in a situation where he's making feature length films. And now he's got to reverse engineer the depth into them. I respect it. And he's gotten really good at it. And the aesthetic is really good. And the initial seed of Art the Clown and the gory effects, who knows where that started, right? That there's a kid in there who was driven to create this Art the Clown that cuts people into pieces. And that is a kind of a fascinating side subject all to itself. But the movies themselves, if you watch them, it's kind of like they're surfacey. Again, totally okay. But this movie that this local guy gave me, and many other horror movies that I watch, have some really bizarre, surreal situations and things. And you go, where did you come up with that, and why? What compelled you to be so passionate about veterans, right? A veteran who gets picked on by the local kids and then snaps and starts to go crazy and attack them back. What compelled you to pick the veteran? What is it that you're saying about veterans? What is it that you're saying about the youth? You can see it in the way they portray those things. And then they use surreal, like in this one that the guy gave me, there's a talking plant and it turns into a military sergeant and starts talking and directing the old man to go on a killing spree. And it's like, that's fucking interesting. I don't really care if it was done in a cheeseball way. I have one that keeps popping into my head and I can't even really remember the movie that well. What's it called? Fuck. I have it. Do I have it? Yeah, I can't remember. It's a cornball movie. It's kind of like The Reanimator. But it gets into the body horror stuff is very surreal. I wish I could remember the name of it. And there's a certain point where the dad's face is a butt. And it's the dad in his head and he's talking through the butt. It's so fucking weird. And it's like a nightmare mixed with reality. So you're exploring the psychology of the main character, and so it's explored through the horror. Like in Pet Sematary, the sister, what's her name, Zelda, the sister that's bedridden and she's really gross, and the mom remembers taking care of her sister on the bed, and she's really creepy. Those are psychological things. They're not just horror because they're visually shocking. They're horror because they're psychological. And the psychology is tied to the characters. And the way that is explored through the body horror is what makes the horror interesting. That's my case for watching cheeseball horror. Watch it and look at the batshit crazy swings that these directors take with the body horror. And it's okay that they take the swings because most people watching it will just enjoy the fact that they saw the crazy body horror and they won't think too deep about it. But the thinking is there. That's my point. The thoughts that went into the selection of like, why is the dad a talking butt? Who the fuck knows? But it's liberated in a way that art house cinema is not, right? Alexander Payne couldn't get away with it. He has to be so deliberate with the moves he makes because he's catering to a highfalutin audience. Horror fans are, well, they're like juggalos, right? They're not pretentious. They like what you give them. They like when things are imperfect, and because they themselves are imperfect, and we accept people and what's given to us. And so if you take a swing and it's goofy, or it doesn't totally fit within the preconception of what it's supposed to be, like Sideways. If Sideways was out of step in any way, it would have been written off as a failure immediately. They have to be. They're kind of rigid. Horror is the opposite, and that's why I love horror. And there's a lot of art. There's a lot of fucking art in horror, not just Art the Clown. And so, yeah, my Day of the Dead analysis. The point is that watch more horror, especially classic horror where they were using the practical effects. Because if you had to go through the effort to make practical effects, you had to have your father character sit in makeup and get an ass prosthetic glued to his face for hours and hours. You at least did put a decent amount of consideration into what you were doing, which is pretty punk rock, right? That's pretty punk rock that you're like, yeah, that's what we're going to do. But then you're not going for an Oscar, right? So you're like kind of liberated from the concerns of what people are going to think about it. And then ultimately the whole goal is to like be scary and shocking. So if it's scary and shocking, then you don't get pinned down as to like, what the fuck did that mean? What were you going for there? Which is what people do with like Sideways and things like that. So it enables directors to feel more, and filmmakers to feel more freed up to explore things with artistic deniability, right? You see what I'm trying to say? That they don't have to answer for all of the things that they do, which makes it more fascinating, because then it's like some of it can almost be subconsciously influencing the film, because maybe even they don't know exactly why they did it, because they didn't think they'd ever have to answer the question of why they did it. And I will figure out what the movie with the talking butt is, and I will link it in the description. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But anyways, have a good day, guys.